was a time in my career when I was young and dumb, and I'm happy to report that after years and years of trying to expand my skills and just learn more and get experience, I am now merely dumb. Anyway, early on in my career, I had a pretty good mentor for all things that were networks, and I was trying to work with the device, and I kept trying to ping it, and I was getting a response back, but it wasn't actually talking to me. And I went to my mentor and said, well, are you able to ping it? And I said, well, I'm trying to hit the address, and I'm getting a response from this 127 dot something, so it's not the right device, but something's out there talking to me. And he kind of laughs. I said, oh, you're such a kidder. What are you talking about? He said, well, you're talking to yourself. I went, well, yeah, it's part of my creative process, but never mind that. And he says, no, no, no. The 127 address, your computer is talking to itself. I went, oh. Hello, and welcome to Chaos and Controls, the show where we talk about modern devices, technology, and techniques for automating your home, business, or life. I'm your host, the Automation Doctor. Today, I thought we could go ahead and talk a little bit about IP addresses, and most notably the important ones that you should probably have memorized so that you don't look like a fool like I did early on. I've found that some of my colleagues just know these, and a lot of folks in IT kind of brush them off, but a lot of other folks have just absolutely no idea why they're important. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about important IP address numbers to memorize. Now, if you go out and do some independent research, you're probably going to see a lot of folks talking about Class A, B, and C networks and a handful of things there. And I'm not saying that any of that stuff isn't important. I'm just saying that as you're getting up and going, the class of the network is going to be somewhat less important to you until you start getting into subnetting and some of that fun stuff. The really important ones, though, have a tendency to crop up right around where the classifications are. So, for instance, 127 is a very important address to know because anything that's on the 127 dot whatever network is going to be the local device you're using. If I'm my computer, then my computer has a 127. My Android device has a 127. My Apple device has a 127. Anything that can talk Ethernet has a 127 dot blah 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 address, and several of them actually, a whole network, so that it can talk back to itself and usually do things like confirm that your network card is working or host things locally so that it can look like it will out on a web address, but you're only seeing it locally. Another important one to know that I come across somewhat frequently in my field is 169. 169 typically is an address reserved for when you're using DHCP, or in other words, you're letting the network that you are on assign you an IP address. And sometimes what will happen is you try to get onto a network, and whether you don't have credentials or you have something subnetted incorrectly, maybe, even though that shouldn't be possible with DHCP, or in my case, I've got a bad adapter that I've got to hit it 2 or 3 times before it'll start doing what I just told it to do. And if any one of those things happens and the local device isn't quite sure what to do, it still has to give you an IP address. And so I often refer to 169 as purgatory. And that's kind of, I recognize you're an IP device. I don't know what to do with you. You're going to go over here. And so if you ever see that, there is a good chance that you've been isolated and placed into purgatory. And typically I just tell people, hit it again and try to jump back onto the network you were aiming for. Another important one to have down is 255. You may remember from the binary episode that 255 is a magic number, and we'll get a little bit more into why it crops up, but if you recall, that's a magic number with 8 bits, and IP addresses, as it turns out, are very dependent on 8-bit numbers, and so 255 is the highest legal number that you will ever see in any IP address or subnet. There's a little bit of a caveat there where you may see some alphanumerics that are 0 through F. So you have A, B, C, D, E, F. That's called hexadecimal. It's another method of expression for the same kind of number. We can talk more about hexadecimal in a later date, but In any case, those are the three numbers that you should really probably have memorized anytime you're dealing with an IP address. 127, I'm talking to myself. 169, I've been put in purgatory. 255, this is the maximum allowed, and typically you can't actually have a device at 255, it's reserved. In any case, that's all I have for you today. Until next time.